Something unbelievable just happened inside the NFL, and it didn't even take a full season to unfold. Imagine being hired as the head coach of a billion-dollar franchise, handed a massive long-term contract, introduced as the man who would lead the team into a new era, and then losing everything before the season even begins. No playoff collapse, no losing streak, no disastrous record, just 40 days. That's all it took for one of the most shocking coaching situations in recent NFL history to completely fall apart. When the Atlanta Falcons announced Kevin Stefanski as their new head coach earlier this year, the move was supposed to signal stability, a calculated hire, a respected offensive mind stepping into a franchise that believed it was finally ready to compete again. The roster looked promising, the young talent was exciting, and the front office believed they had found the leader who could tie it all together. For a moment, everything felt aligned. The organization, the fans, and the city were ready to believe. But that optimism didn't last long. Behind the scenes, reports began surfacing that things inside the building weren't going as smoothly as the public believed. Conversations in the locker room reportedly turned tense. Questions started circulating about leadership style, communication, and whether the new coach truly connected with the young core of the team. At first, it seemed like normal off-season noise, the kind of rumors that pop up around every franchise during the transition period. Then came the moment that changed everything. During a public appearance at the NFL Combine, what should have been a routine media event quickly turned into something far more uncomfortable. Instead of excitement surrounding Atlanta's new leadership, the reaction from the crowd and media environment reportedly shifted into something closer to embarrassment. It was the kind of moment that spreads across the league within minutes, the kind of moment that makes owners and executives start asking serious questions. And according to insiders, Falcons owner Arthur Blank didn't take that moment lightly. Arthur Blank is not just another team owner quietly watching from a luxury suite. He built his empire by acting quickly when something threatens the value of his investments. When word reached him about what had just happened and the growing tension surrounding the team, reports suggest his reaction was immediate and explosive. What was supposed to be a long-term partnership suddenly looked like a mistake that needed to be corrected fast. Because this situation wasn't just about optics, it was about control of the franchise's future. The Falcons believe they are entering a critical window with a young roster full of explosive talent. Players like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson represent the kind of offensive core that most teams spend years trying to build. And with young quarterback Michael Penix Jr. viewed by many as the long-term face of the franchise, the organization cannot afford internal chaos before the season even begins. So when rumors started circulating that the new coach was already clashing with key figures inside the building, the alarm bells inside the front office reportedly began ringing louder by the day. What happened next stunned almost everyone around the league. Because in a sport where coaches usually get years to prove themselves, where organizations often tolerate losing seasons before making a change, the Falcons allegedly pulled the plug after just 40 days. Not 40 games, not even 40 practices, 40 days.
But the firing itself is only part of the story. What's happening behind the scenes right now could turn this entire situation into something far bigger than a simple coaching change. Because the Falcons didn't just hire Stefanski, they reportedly committed to a massive multi-year contract, and if ownership is now trying to walk away from that deal without paying the full buyout, it could trigger a legal battle that shakes the league. And the truth is, the public drama we've seen so far may only be the surface. Because once we start digging into what really happened inside that locker room, the conflict with Atlanta's young quarterback, and the legal strategy the Falcons might be preparing right now, this story becomes even more explosive. And what happened next might explain why this collapse happened so fast. The moment everything started unraveling didn't happen in a locker room meeting or a closed-door argument with the front office. It happened in public, in front of cameras, reporters, scouts, and executives from every team in the league. The NFL Combine is usually a place where coaches introduce their vision, talk about prospects, and quietly build momentum for the upcoming season. But this time, the spotlight didn't bring excitement to Atlanta's new head coach. It brought something far worse. When Kevin Stefanski stepped up to speak during the media sessions, the atmosphere was already tense. Reporters had been hearing whispers for days that things inside the Atlanta organization weren't as stable as they appeared. Questions about leadership style, locker room chemistry, and the team's direction were quietly circulating through the media hallways. Normally, a new head coach can smooth those concerns over with confidence and clarity, but according to several reports, that didn't happen here. Instead, the moment quickly became uncomfortable. As Stefanski tried to address questions about the Falcons' future, the reaction in the room reportedly shifted. Some insiders later claimed the atmosphere felt awkward, almost hostile. The confidence that usually surrounds a newly hired coach just wasn't there. And in the NFL, perception spreads fast. When media members sense uncertainty, it travels through the league like wildfire. Within minutes, conversations began circulating among executives and analysts about whether Atlanta had already made a mistake. But the real shock came from the reaction outside the media room. Reports started spreading that fans gathered nearby reacted loudly and not in support. Instead of applause or excitement for the Falcons' new era, the response was closer to open frustration. For a coach who had only been on the job for a little over a month, it was a brutal introduction to the reality of the Atlanta fan base. And moments like that matter more than people think. In today's NFL, image and confidence are almost as important as wins and losses. Because once the perception of weakness appears, it becomes incredibly difficult to erase. And that moment at the Combine didn't just echo through social media, it reportedly made its way straight to the top of the Falcons organization. Word reached owner Arthur Blank almost immediately, and according to insiders, his reaction was anything but calm. Blank has spent years building the Falcons brand into something that represents the city of Atlanta, energetic, confident, and competitive. Watching his newly hired coach become the center of public embarrassment was something he reportedly took very personally. Some reports claim Blank didn't wait around for explanations.
Instead, sources suggest he quickly flew back to Atlanta and began demanding answers from the people responsible for the hire. Inside the organization, the mood reportedly shifted overnight. What had previously been seen as a long-term leadership plan suddenly looked like a potential crisis. Executives who had supported the hire were now being asked to justify it. Conversations that were supposed to focus on roster construction and draft strategy turned into urgent meetings about damage control. Because once an owner starts questioning a head coach this early, the clock begins ticking very fast. But the Combine embarrassment was only the spark. The real fire had already been building quietly behind the scenes. While the public was just beginning to notice tension, players inside the building had reportedly been feeling it for weeks. And the moment those frustrations started leaking out, the situation inside Atlanta went from uncomfortable to completely unstable. Because the biggest problem wasn't what happened at the Combine, it was what the players themselves were starting to say about their new head coach. What made this situation truly dangerous for Atlanta wasn't the media reaction, it was what was reportedly happening inside the building. In the NFL, coaches can survive criticism from fans. They can survive harsh headlines and talk show debates. But there's one thing a head coach almost never recovers from: losing the locker room. And according to multiple reports and rumors circulating around the league, that may have already been happening in Atlanta. The tension didn't explode overnight. At first, it showed up in small ways. Conversations between players reportedly became more skeptical. Meetings felt colder. Some veterans began questioning the direction of the offense and the way communication was being handled. None of this was public yet, but insiders say the energy inside the facility had already shifted. The excitement that normally follows a new coaching hire simply wasn't there. Then, the NFL Players Association report cards started entering the conversation. For those who don't follow the process closely, these report cards are one of the rare moments where players can anonymously evaluate the leadership inside their organization. No cameras, no microphones, just honest feedback about coaches, facilities, and management. When players feel respected and confident in their leadership, the grades usually reflect it. But when a locker room is frustrated, those surveys can reveal problems that teams desperately try to keep hidden. And rumors suggest Kevin Stefanski's evaluation didn't look good. Some reports claim the grade attached to his leadership landed near the bottom of the league. Now, a single number on a report card might not seem like a huge deal to fans watching from the outside, but inside an NFL building, that kind of result is like setting off a fire alarm. It sends a clear message that the players, the people actually stepping onto the field, have serious doubts about the person leading them. And once that doubt spreads, it becomes almost impossible to control. Because football locker rooms operate on trust, players need to believe the coach standing on the sideline understands them, respects them, and puts them in positions to succeed. If that connection disappears, something strange begins to happen. Effort drops just a little. Communication breaks down. The team stops playing with the same edge. It's subtle at first, but every coach in the league knows how dangerous that shift can be. Some insiders began describing Stefanski's leadership style as rigid and overly controlling. Critics claimed he approached the locker room more like a corporate office than a room full of elite athletes. Instead of adapting to the personalities of his players, the perception was that he expected everyone to adapt to him. For a young roster filled with confident, high-energy stars, that approach reportedly didn't land well. And the Falcons aren't just any team. This is a roster built around explosive personalities and rising talent. Players like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson aren't quiet role players waiting for instructions. They're dynamic athletes expected to help carry the franchise into a new era. Managing that kind of locker room requires more than play-calling ability. It requires leadership that players actually believe in. According to the rumors swirling around the league, that belief was already fading. Veterans reportedly started questioning the direction of the team. Younger players who should have been energized by a fresh start were instead becoming uncertain about where they stood. And when that uncertainty spreads through a locker room, it creates a dangerous domino effect. One frustrated player becomes two become five, and suddenly the head coach finds himself leading a group that no longer fully trusts his vision. But even with all of that tension building behind the scenes, the situation might still have been salvageable. Because locker rooms argue all the time, coaches and players clash, systems get adjusted. Sometimes those early conflicts even make teams stronger. But in Atlanta's case, there was one situation that pushed the entire organization toward the breaking point, and it involved the most important player on the roster, Michael Penix Jr. If there is one rule every NFL coach understands the moment they walk into a new building, it's this: you don't gamble with the franchise quarterback. You can change schemes, shuffle the depth chart, even challenge veteran leaders if necessary. But the young quarterback that ownership has invested its future in, that player is usually untouchable. And according to rumors circulating around Atlanta, that's exactly where Kevin Stefanski may have made his most dangerous mistake. Michael Penix Jr. isn't just another name on the Falcons roster. To many fans, he represents the beginning of a completely new era. After years of searching for stability at the most important position in football, Atlanta finally believed it had found a player with the talent, confidence, and charisma to lead the franchise forward. His arm strength, composure under pressure, and connection with the fan base quickly turned him into one of the most exciting young figures in the city. Which is why the reports that began surfacing behind the scenes shocked so many people. According to league chatter, Stefanski was already questioning whether Penix should be the long-term centerpiece of his system. Instead of fully committing to building the offense around the young cornerback, rumors suggested he was exploring alternative directions. Now, it's important to remember that much of this discussion remains speculation, but the mere suggestion that a new coach might pivot away from the organization's biggest investment created immediate tension. Because in Atlanta, Penix isn't just a quarterback, he's the plan. Ownership reportedly envisioned a fast, explosive offense built around his skill set. The Falcons roster reflects that philosophy. Weapons like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson were assembled to create a dynamic system where a confident quarterback could push the ball downfield and unlock the full potential of the offense. It's a blueprint designed around speed, creativity, and excitement, exactly the type of football Atlanta fans have been craving. So when whispers started spreading that the new head coach might not fully buy into that blueprint, the reaction inside the building was immediate. Front office executives were reportedly caught off guard. Some insiders claimed the organization expected Stefanski to develop Penix, not reconsider him. The idea that a coach would attempt to redirect the franchise's long-term vision only weeks into the job raised serious questions about alignment between leadership and ownership. And in the NFL, misalignment at the top can destroy a team faster than any losing season.
The situation also carried another layer of risk. Young quarterbacks are extremely sensitive to confidence and support from their coaching staff. When a player feels trusted, his performance usually grows with that belief. But when rumors begin circulating that the coach isn't fully committed to him, doubt can creep in quickly. Even the most talented quarterbacks struggle when they feel like they're constantly playing to prove their worth. Fans in Atlanta were already watching the situation closely. Social media conversations began exploding with speculation about what the team might be planning. Some fans feared the Falcons were about to repeat a mistake many franchises have made before, bringing in a coach whose system didn't match the strengths of their most valuable player. Others wondered whether the rumors were exaggerated, another case of off-season drama getting blown out of proportion. But one thing became clear very quickly. The relationship between a head coach and his quarterback is the heartbeat of every successful team. If that relationship starts cracking before the first game of the season, the entire foundation becomes unstable. And inside Atlanta's organization, those cracks were reportedly starting to widen. What made the situation even more concerning was that critics claimed this wasn't the first time Kevin Stefanski had struggled with managing high-profile quarterbacks. Some analysts began pointing back to earlier moments in his career, moments that suggested a possible pattern. And when those comparisons started surfacing, the conversation around Atlanta's new coach took a much darker turn. Once the tension around Michael Penix Jr. started making waves, analysts across the league began digging into Kevin Stefanski's past, and the deeper they looked, the more one uncomfortable question kept popping up. Had this happened before? Because Atlanta might not have been the first locker room where concerns about Stefanski's leadership style began to surface. During his previous time in Cleveland, Stefanski built a reputation as a highly organized offensive mind. On paper, his system was structured, disciplined, and methodical. For certain rosters, that type of approach can work extremely well, but critics have long argued that the same structure that makes his offense efficient can also become a problem when it comes to managing personalities inside a modern NFL locker room. And the NFL today is filled with personalities. Quarterbacks in particular are no longer just system managers quietly running plays. Many of them arrive with massive confidence, huge fan followings, and a style that blends football with culture and personal branding. When that confidence is embraced, it can energize an entire franchise. But when a coach tries to control or suppress it, tension can build quickly. Some commentators began pointing to the situation involving quarterback Shedeur Sanders as an example that raised eyebrows around the league. During that period, critics claimed the relationship between coach and quarterback became increasingly complicated. Instead of building the offense around the natural strengths of the player, reports suggested the system demanded strict adherence to Stefanski's philosophy. Now, again, much of that discussion has lived in the world of speculation and opinion, but the perception alone was enough to fuel debate among analysts and former players. One of the voices that sparked a lot of conversation was Cam Newton. Newton, who understands the pressure of being a high-profile quarterback better than most, didn't focus on playbooks or schemes when discussing the situation. Instead, he talked about personality dynamics.
According to Newton, some coaches struggle when their quarterback carries a strong identity, the kind of swagger that naturally draws attention and leadership inside the locker room.
In Newton's view, the challenge isn't talent, it's control. When a coach feels the need to tightly manage a quarterback's personality instead of channeling it, the relationship can start feeling restrictive. Instead of empowering the player, the system begins to box him in. And once a quarterback feels that pressure, the entire offense can tighten up. That's the fear some Falcons fans began expressing as the rumors around Penix started circulating. Michael Penix Jr. isn't a quiet, conservative player who simply blends into the background. His confidence, energy, and connection with teammates are part of what makes him so exciting to watch. Supporters believe those qualities are exactly what Atlanta needs to unlock the full potential of its young roster. But if the coaching approach attempts to smooth out those edges too aggressively, the effect can be the opposite of what the team intends. Instead of elevating the quarterback, the system can begin holding him back. And that's why the comparisons to Cleveland started making people inside the Falcons organization uncomfortable. If there really was a pattern developing, if Stefanski consistently struggled to adapt to quarterbacks with strong personalities, then Atlanta might have unknowingly stepped into a situation that was never going to work. Because the Falcons didn't hire a coach to rebuild from scratch, they hired one to accelerate a roster that many believe is already loaded with talent. The team has playmakers everywhere. Drake London stretching defenses, Kyle Pitts creating mismatches, Bijan Robinson bringing explosive versatility to the backfield. On paper, this offense has the ingredients to become one of the most dangerous units in the league. But that kind of firepower only works if the leadership behind it knows how to push the right buttons. And when Arthur Blank started hearing more and more of these concerns about locker room tension, quarterback conflict, and echoes of past problems, insiders say the Falcons owner began asking a very serious question. Had the organization just made a massive mistake? For most NFL owners, frustration builds slowly. They watch the team struggle, listen to advisors, and wait months, sometimes years, before making a drastic move. But Arthur Blank has never been known as a man who enjoys sitting still while problems grow. He built his empire by recognizing when something wasn't working and acting quickly. And according to insiders around the Falcons organization, the situation surrounding Kevin Stefanski was pushing him closer and closer to a breaking point. At first, Blank reportedly tried to give the new hire the benefit of the doubt. Every coaching transition comes with growing pains. New systems take time, personalities take time to adjust. Owners usually expect a few bumps along the way, especially during the early months of a new regime. But what worried Blank wasn't just the criticism from outside the building, it was the growing sense that the problems were coming from inside. The reports about the locker room tension were troubling enough. Hearing whispers about the relationship with Michael Penix Jr. raised even more alarms. But when those issues started combining with the public embarrassment at the combine, the picture suddenly looked far worse than a normal adjustment period. It looked like the beginning of a leadership crisis.
And for an owner who has invested billions into building the Falcons brand, that kind of crisis is impossible to ignore. Arthur Blank didn't spend decades building one of the NFL's most modern stadiums and assembling a roster full of explosive young talent just to watch the entire project unravel before the season even began. People inside the organization say Blank began asking tough questions. How did this hire happen? Who pushed for it? And why were these issues appearing only weeks into the partnership? One name reportedly kept coming up during those internal conversations: franchise legend Matt Ryan. Ryan had remained closely connected to the organization and was believed to be one of the voices who supported Stefanski as a potential leader for the next chapter of Falcons football. On paper, the recommendation made sense. Stefanski had a reputation as an intelligent offensive mind, someone who could bring structure and discipline to a young roster. But structure alone doesn't win locker rooms. As Blank reportedly examined the early warning signs, the situation began looking less like a minor miscalculation and more like a fundamental mismatch. The Falcons weren't a rebuilding project searching for patience and slow development. They were a team sitting on a roster packed with speed, youth, and explosive personalities. What they needed was a coach who could ignite that energy. Instead, the reports suggested a system that felt restrictive, a leadership style that struggled to connect with the culture of the team. For a city like Atlanta, a city built on rhythm, creativity, and swagger, that disconnect was becoming impossible to ignore. And when an owner begins to feel that the identity of his franchise is being threatened, patience disappears quickly. According to rumors circulating around league insiders, Blank's frustration eventually turned into something stronger than concern. Some described him as furious. Others said he felt misled about what the hire would bring to the organization. Either way, the conversations inside the Falcons facility reportedly shifted from problem-solving to something much more serious. They started discussing the exit plan, because by that point, the organization wasn't just worried about whether Stefanski could fix the situation. The real fear was that the damage might already be done. If the locker room had already begun losing faith in the new coach, forcing the relationship to continue could risk poisoning the entire season before it even started. But there was one enormous obstacle standing in the way of a quick decision. Kevin Stefanski hadn't been hired on a short trial run. The Falcons had reportedly committed to a massive long-term contract only weeks earlier. Firing a head coach that quickly wouldn't just be embarrassing, it would be incredibly expensive. And that's where the situation took an even more dramatic turn. Because instead of simply accepting the financial loss, rumors suggest the Falcons' legal team began searching for something hidden deep inside the contract, a way out that could change everything. Firing a head coach is never simple, but firing one just weeks after signing a massive contract creates a problem most organizations dread. In the NFL, coaching deals are usually built with heavy guarantees. Owners understand that if things go wrong, they'll likely still be paying that coach for years. It's the cost of doing business in a league where stability is supposed to matter. But the situation unfolding in Atlanta may be pushing those rules into completely new territory. Because Kevin Stefanski wasn't hired on a short-term experiment, reports suggest the Falcons handed him a long-term deal worth millions, a contract designed to show confidence and stability for the future of the franchise. Normally, when a team makes that kind of commitment, they're prepared to live with it, even if the results take time to arrive. But this situation wasn't normal.
If the Falcons truly decided to move on after only 40 days, the organization would still be on the hook for a massive payout. In simple terms, the team could end up paying a coach millions of dollars to never coach a single game. For most franchises, that's an embarrassing but unavoidable reality. Owners swallow the financial loss and move forward. Yet rumors suggest Arthur Blank may not be willing to accept that outcome. Behind the scenes, insiders claim the Falcons' legal team has been studying the fine print of Stefanski's contract line by line, searching for something that could allow the organization to escape the financial obligation. And the phrase reportedly being discussed inside those meetings is one that rarely appears in coaching headlines: conduct detrimental to the team. That phrase is usually associated with player discipline. It's the type of clause teams use when a player's behavior damages the reputation or operation of the organization. But applying that same idea to a head coach would be something entirely different. If Atlanta could successfully argue that Stefanski's actions or leadership caused measurable harm to the team's culture or reputation, it could potentially open the door to voiding portions of the guaranteed money. In other words, the Falcons might be trying to walk away from the contract without paying the full buyout. And if that strategy is real, it would send shockwaves through the entire league, because coaching contracts have always operated on a certain understanding. If a team hires you, they accept the financial risk of firing you. Breaking that expectation could change the way future deals are negotiated across the NFL. Agents would fight harder for protections, coaches would demand stronger guarantees, owners might think twice before offering huge long-term deals.
In short, it could reshape the business side of coaching. But attempting a move like this also carries enormous risk. If Stefanski believes the Falcons are unfairly trying to void his contract, the situation could quickly escalate into a legal battle. And lawsuits between coaches and franchises are incredibly rare, especially ones involving this level of money and public attention. If it reached that point, the case wouldn't just be about Atlanta, it would become a league-wide spectacle. Every owner, every coach, and every front office executive would be watching closely, because if the Falcons succeed in escaping the financial commitment, it sets a precedent. But if Stefanski challenges the decision and wins, the organization could face not only the original contract cost, but also significant legal fallout and reputational damage. And there's another layer to the drama. Even while lawyers might be reviewing contracts and clauses behind closed doors, the football world doesn't stop watching. Players notice everything. Agents notice everything. Other coaches around the league notice everything. The Falcons are trying to build a winning culture around a young, exciting roster, but a high-profile contract battle could easily become a distraction that overshadows the entire season, which means the organization now finds itself walking a very thin line. On one side is the financial burden of a costly coaching mistake. On the other is the risk of turning that mistake into a legal war that could dominate headlines for months. And as the rumors continue to swirl around Atlanta, one thing is becoming clear. This situation is no longer just about football decisions. It's about power, reputation, and who ultimately controls the future of a billion-dollar franchise. What happens next in Atlanta could shape the direction of the franchise for years to come. On the surface, this looks like a simple coaching collapse, a hire that went wrong faster than anyone expected. But the deeper you look, the more complicated the situation becomes, because this isn't just about one coach losing his job. It's about trust inside an NFL organization and what happens when that trust breaks almost immediately. The Falcons now find themselves standing in the middle of a storm. The locker room is watching closely to see how leadership handles the fallout. Players want stability, especially on a roster this young. When a team is built around emerging stars like Michael Penix Jr., Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson, the last thing the organization can afford is uncertainty at the top. A confused or divided leadership structure can derail a promising roster faster than any defensive scheme. And right now, the entire league is watching how Atlanta responds.
Front offices across the NFL are paying attention because situations like this are extremely rare. Coaches usually get time. Even struggling hires often survive a full season before owners make a decision. But if the rumors are true and the Falcons really ended the partnership after just 40 days, it sends a message that the margin for error in today's NFL might be shrinking. Owners want results, but more importantly, they want connection. The modern NFL locker room is different from what it was 20 years ago. Players are more vocal, personalities are bigger, culture inside the building matters as much as the playbook. A coach who can't connect with his roster, no matter how brilliant he may be on the whiteboard, is going to struggle to survive. And that might be the real lesson hidden inside this entire situation. If the reports about locker room tension, quarterback conflict, and internal frustration are even partially true, then Atlanta may have realized something early that many teams learned far too late. Talent alone doesn't guarantee success. Systems alone don't guarantee success. Leadership, real leadership that players believe in, is the piece that holds everything together. Without it, even the most promising roster can fall apart. But the story may not be finished yet, because if the Falcons truly attempt to void Stefanski's contract using the conduct detrimental argument, the situation could explode far beyond Atlanta. Lawyers could become involved, agents could challenge the decision, and what started as a coaching mistake could evolve into one of the most talked about legal disputes the NFL has seen in years. If that happens, the ripple effects will reach every corner of the league. Future coaching contracts could change. Owners might approach hiring decisions with far more caution. Coaches themselves may demand stronger protections before accepting long-term deals. what unfolds in Atlanta over the coming months could quietly reshape the business side of professional football. And for Falcons fans, the biggest question still remains unanswered. Was this just a brief burst of off-season chaos, the kind of drama that fades once the games begin? Or was this the warning sign of a deeper problem inside the organization, a ticking situation that forced ownership to act before the damage became permanent? Right now, nobody outside the Falcons facility knows the full truth, but one thing is certain. In the NFL, reputations are built slowly and destroyed quickly. A single moment can change the trajectory of careers, franchises, and even entire seasons. And in this case, the fallout from those 40 days may echo across the league much longer than anyone expected. Because when power, money, and pride collide inside the NFL, the story rarely ends quietly.